Good evening from Parsley Hill Spaniels. I'm going to do another evening spooky woodland walk. I'm crunching of the leaves, my teddies, quite a few branches down. Let's go this way. Oh, bit of ducking going on. So, hello and welcome to all the new subscribers. Thanks for joining us. Spaniels say hi. Glad you could come along with us. Hope you enjoy our spooky walk in the woods. Like I say, I've got my head torch on so I can see where I'm going. But I'm not dressed correctly. Never mind. It's evening. Who cares? Some spooky eyes coming through there. There they are. Let's see if I can get my head torch right so it's... Oops. There we are. That's better. Right. So, spookiness. Spooky things that happened while we were at the tower. Let's see. Now we said about the walls, and we said about my sexy left knee. So let's talk about the Salt Tower. Now the Salt Tower is supposedly one of the most haunted towers in the Tower of London, of which there's 22 towers. That makes up the whole of the Tower of London. Anyway, the Salt Tower is also where Father John Gerard was kept as a prisoner. He didn't die there, but he's a very interesting Jesuit priest that was kept there during Queen Elizabeth I's time. And he escaped as well. Go and have a look him up on the net, read about him. Interesting guy. Anyway, like I say, the Salt Tower is meant to be one of the most haunted towers. And when the Major was on duty as a yeoman, Salt Tower may have been on part of one of his areas that he was in charge of around the tower. And so he'd have to go in there and make sure everything was good, and closing time and things like that, make sure nobody was getting stuck in the tower at night. And every time he went in there, he felt like somebody was pushing him. Oh, I can't get that. That's bad. He felt like somebody was pushing him, and there was nobody there. And he'd come down the turret steps, and he'd be pushed down them, and there was nobody there. Now our daughter went in there to... What did she go in there for? She went in there with a friend actually the first time, and they were just, looking around and that. And when she came out, she looked on the back of her leg, and she had all these scratch marks, like a cat had scratched her. When the cats scratch, they draw blood, but you don't get a proper line. It's like it's like dots of blood, isn't it? Well, she had dots of scratches, and they were starting to bleed. And she thought, what earth's that? And the first time it happened to her, she thought, oh, perhaps I just caught my leg on the back of one of the stone steps. Edward's found something. Could be a mouse, could be a vole, could be a shrew. It's not a rabbit, I know that. Oh. Teddy's barking. Anyway, she thought no more of it, except for the next day when she looked at her leg, there was no marks whatsoever. She went in there again a few weeks later, And the same thing happened, only this time she was in there with my hubby, the Major, her dad, and they were coming to meet me from work that day. And when they met me at the tube station, just home from where I worked, I said, "Oh, what's wrong with your leg?" And it's all round by the bottom of her leg, so like her leg going into her ankle. I said, "It looks like a cat's got you. You found something again. What cat's got you?" And she said, "Nothing." She said, I've been in the salt tower, and when I came out, this is what happened. I said, "How weird." I said, "Did you feel it happening?" And she said, "No, I didn't feel it happening." She said, "I just came out, and Dad said to me, 'What's that on the back of your leg?' And got all these marks, all these scratches, and some of them have been bleeding." And again, the next day, not one mark on her. It was as if it had never happened. Anyway, the next time she went in, it got a little bit worse. Well, it got quite a bit worse, because she could actually feel something happening to her this time. And when she came home, she said, "Please," she said, "Mum, can you look at my stomach?" This wasn't a child, like child. She was 17 at the time, coming up 18. And she said, can you look at my stomach? It really hurts, it's burning." I said, "Okay, so, lift your top up, let me have a look." And she had scratch marks all over her stomach, like horrible scratch marks. And again, almost like a cat or an animal of some sort had done that and dug their nails in and caused it to bleed. And again, it wasn't like profusely bleeding, it was just like little speckles of blood, it wasn't a lot. But, so obviously, put antiseptic on her, cleaned her up, and it was still like that when she went to bed. And then the next morning she got up and had a shower, and then she said, "Mum, come have a look at this." And I said, "What, has it got worse? We'll get some cream on it." And she said, "No, look." And when we looked, there wasn't a mark on her. It was so weird. After that, she rarely went in there. She said, "Somebody has got it in for me. It only ever happens to me when I go in the salt tower." So she kept away from it. She did go in the salt tower a few more times. Didn't stay very long and came away with a few scratches on her. So she really didn't like that. No, she didn't, Gladys. So that was quite scary and spooky. Another one that happened to us. Rob and I were laying in bed, just reading, had the light on each side, and we heard running. Now, remember I said that we used to live in the old hospital block, and our apartment obviously used to be wards on the hospital block, and you could hear this running. It was coming as if it was coming from like the next flat over, running down the corridor, coming closer and closer and closer. Now, our flat, in order to get to it, you had to go up some boiler house steps, across the roof, and then up the stone staircase to get in. And the other part of the old hospital block, you approached from a different side. There was only one corridor that connected the two sides, and even then that was an open door corridor, outside corridor. So you would come up and it would be on our landing, and you'd go across and open a door, and then you were outside again and into the next block. But it sounded like it was coming down that block. So our next door neighbour, you had to go out that way to get to them. And it sounded like it was coming down this very, very long corridor, and the footsteps and the running were getting closer and closer and louder and louder and louder, until we heard them in our flat running, and then they got to our bedroom door, and the bang on our bedroom door, it went bang, like really deep and, thudding. And remember, our door was at least 3, maybe 3.5, 4 inches thick, the door itself. It shook, absolutely shook. Now, I looked at the Major looked at me. We looked at our dogs, Branston and Stinky. Branston and Stinky kind of slunk under the bed for a bit. So we thought, oh, something's not right. Everything went deathly quiet. And I said, what on earth was that? And hubby said, I've got no idea. I said, okay. And he said, well, it doesn't sound like our front door opened. It literally sounded like it came through the walls and then through our landing, our corridor, hallway, and onto our bedroom door. And I said, well, are you going to get up and have a look? He went, nope. I said, oh, you roughy tufty squaddy. And I said, well, I'm not getting up to have a look either. And he said, right, so that's good. Neither of us are getting up to have a look. So may I suggest that if I fall asleep with my light on, my bedside light on, don't turn it off, just leave it on. And so we left it on. That never happened again while we were there. It only happened the once. But oh my, was that so... It felt different to the other mischievous things that happened in our flat. It felt, I wouldn't say evil, but quite, what's the word? Menacing. It felt menacing, that one. Really did. Just looking around here. It's funny, I can't see the teddies. Oh, we're back at the vegetable plot. What else has happened at the tower? Oh, a friend of ours, he's no longer with us, unfortunately. He passed away. But he used to live in one of the apartments on Tower Green, which is, if you go into the Tower of London and you go underneath the arch of the Bloody Tower, and you go up the steps, and right in front of you is the Jewel House, and then to the left of it is St. Peter Advincula, Chapel of St. Peter Advincula. And then you've got Beauchamp Tower, and then you've got the Queen's House, and then you've got looks like three tall skinny houses. Well, they've been made into apartments for people to live there. Well, he lived in one of them, and he got up one evening, or one night I should say, because he thought he could feel a draft in the house. And he was quite right, he could feel a draft in the house. His front door was open. And he thought, what on earth is my door doing open? Bearing in mind we never actually locked our doors because, hey, who's gonna break into our apartments when we've got a company of armed soldiers living, billeted with us as well. So, we're pretty safe. And he thought, what on earth is this? And he looked out and he could see his son, who was only about 8 at the time, I think. I won't embarrass him by saying his name. Oh, spooky with the teddies doing that. Anyway, he looked out and he could see his son. And his son seemed to be playing with somebody or someone. And so he walked out thinking that perhaps it was some of the other children that lived there. And they'd all snuck out for playing at midnight, that sort of thing. And there was nobody there. And he said, come on, in you come. It's getting late, come on in. And he said, just say bye to your friends, it's time for you to come in, off you go, whoever you are, expect your mums and dads are wondering where you are as well. Come on in. So he took his son in, and his son turned around to his friends, let's say, and said, good night, Richard, good night, Eddie, good night, Edward, and came in. Now at the time there was no Richard or Edward as children at the Tower of London, but about 550 years previously there had been two little boys. One was Richard and one was Edward, the two boy princes, and he'd been playing with his friends out on Tower Green. Bit spooky, isn't it? Now Ray also had a time, and he told us this because it actually shook him up quite a bit, that he was stood in his kitchen late one evening, just, having a quiet cup of tea before he went to bed, because he'd been on watch that night, so he'd come in after the ceremony of the keys, so he's probably got in about 10:30, just having a quiet cup of tea, and from behind him on his Welsh dresser a cup came flying past him and hit the wall. Missed him, he said, by an inch, if that. And he looked round thinking perhaps, his son had got up and had done this. No. And it wasn't his wife. And as he turned, another cup came flying past him. And he put in for a move so that he could... actually, he moved out of the tower because it became... These incidents became too much for him. So, there's a few more spooky tales from the tower. Oh, I don't know if you can see them, we've got stars up there tonight. No moon, unfortunately. Just stars. And obviously something annoying Adelaide. Anyway, that's the spooky tales for tonight. Sleep well, everyone. Don't let the bed bugs bite. Take care, and happy sniffs from Parsley Hill.